learn it without realizing what you have stored there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to Sweden, it was very easy for me to just continue and learn new expressions, and
Mm-hmm.
I had no problem.
Mm-hmm. How long were you over there on your honeymoon?
I think it was from July, about 6 or 7 weeks.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, we went to Lisby. That no tours or anything planned. We just went as we wanted. We looked up the relatives as we went along, and we visited that island of Lisby, which is was a Hanseatic League important city. And then we went up to the part of Sweden which they say you should see and then die because it's so beautiful, in Dalarna.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
up where Zorn lived, his home, the painter.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Zorn, Anders Zorn. And we made our headquarters at the home of a classmate of Wally's mother in Kalmar. And we took a trunk and we left it there, and then we went back there afterwards.
Now your husband Wally was born in this country.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And he was your age or a little older?
He was 4 years older.
4 years older. And when you came back and the crash occurred, what happened to, he had an auto parts business for a while.
He was in business with his brother-in-law, which wasn't the best thing, being with a relative. And I think things would have been different if he had, his partner had run things differently. But then too, these these stores like XXX could sell things cheaper.
Sure.
He sold first quality, all kinds of brake lining and all kinds of auto parts. They had a good reputation. In fact, one time they had a catalog that was worth $80,000 worth of stock in it. So it was a shame, and I guess he just never got over that.
Pretty hard in his self-esteem.
Because he worked hard, and his brother-in-law was very easy to dip into the till, for things, maybe not make a record of it. He wasn't as honest as he should have been, and that hurt him.
How long were you married before your first child was born?
3 years.
3 years, and that was Peter?
Yes.
Who's here with us today and around the corner.
Nancy was born 3 years later, 1935.
And Peter's, does he have a middle name?
Erland.
Peter Erland Roseen.
Now it should have been, his last name should have been Erlandsson, because his father,
Who's?
Wally's father's name should have been, instead of Roseen, it should have been Erlandsson. Roseen means nothing. He just took that name when he learned to trade. And his father's name was Erland, so he should have been Erlandsson.
So they didn't change it at Ellis Island, it just happened?
No, he did before he left Sweden. When they learned to trade, sometimes they would do that.
I see.
But that was his, that should have been his name.
Yeah. And so Pete, your son, was born in what year about?
In 1932.
32. And then 3 years later, I think you said Nancy?
Nancy was born in 35.
And Nancy Charlotte?
Right.
Roseen
yes.
Levitt.
We have 5 generations with Charlotte. My mother's Anna Charlotte, mine Mildred Charlotte, Nancy Charlotte, Beth Charlotte, and now Laura Charlotte.
Really? And Pete finished high school in Bristol.
Yeah.
And then
He went to Mitchell College.
Mitchell College in Connecticut.
New London.
Yeah.
For 1 year, and things were disrupted then. He should have stayed there. It was a 2-year college, a junior college. But he went to UConn and went there 3 years, but it was too big a school for him. He shouldn't have in Florida. So he didn't get his degree from there, but he got a lot out of it. Didn't hurt him.
And then what did he do? Did he start with Pan Am after that?
Then he was working for Smith Cleaves in New Britain for a little while, which was company which sold supplies to different manufacturers. And then he, I think he was laid off from that because times were getting into sort of a depression then too, or a recession. And he went down to New York.
And started working for Pan American Airways?
Yeah, and he worked there 29 years.
And they got, towards the end of his time there, they became a troubled business.
That's his trouble.
And tell me, what about Nancy? I remember she finished high school in Bristol.
Yes.
And then did she go to Colby?
Colby for 3
in
years.
Maine?
In 3 years. And Bob was graduating.
Bob Levitt.
The year, yes, that she was a junior, so she just couldn't see them being separated. So they got married that summer, and she went to live in Stoneham, in his home. But she continued her schooling with Boston University. And then David was born.
Did she get a degree from Boston University?
Yes, she did, in psychology. It was very beneficial to her because here she was carrying. In fact, she went to school until July, and David was born in August.
Mm-hmm. And David is her oldest son, who is now in the diplomatic service,
Yes.
or foreign, what do you call it?
He's an attaché in the embassy.
And I remember him well because my mother loved David especially.
Mm-hmm.
And
He was very
he was very good in Swedish, and
Yeah.
he went to UMass, and then he had a year at
2 years in
and-
University of Minnesota.
yeah, and at one point he was in Sweden for a year.
He went in his junior year at UMass. He left and went to Sweden.
So now he had to learn Greek. He's in Greece.
Yes, he learned Greek very well. He got good compliments on his ability.
And he's still single?
He's getting married. Yes, he's getting married in May to a Greek girl who is in the embassy too.
Uh-huh. And then these grandchildren are all Nancy's children, Nancy and Bob. So there's David, and who's second?
Peter.
Peter, and then who's third?
Beth.
Beth.
Then Andrew.
Andrew.
And James.
Yeah, James. And they live in Reading, or North Reading?
Peter lives in Nashville.
No, I mean, where were they raised?
Oh, yes, all of them. They lived in, David and Peter were born, well, they were all born in the same hospital in Stoneham.
Yeah.
But they were living in Stoneham at the time when Peter and David were born. Then they moved to North Reading, and Beth was born there. And Andrew was born there too. That's right, he was very young. And then they went to Reading.
And your son-in-law is now retired. You worked for GE in
Yes.
Lynn, was it?
Yes.
Mass. And then, as I remember, you and Nancy and her husband have always been interested in a place in New Hampshire called Wolfboro.
That's right.
And you and your son go up there a lot.
Yes, he's a 50% partner.
Peter, your son?
Yeah, you see, we bought it. It was, every summer they wanted to go on a little vacation, so they'd go different places, have no place especially, wondering where they were going. Sometimes the accommodations weren't good.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the one, the instigator. I said, well, why don't you look around in the fall for a place and that we can buy, and we'll all go together on it, Peter and then Nancy and Bob and Wally and I. So he did that, and they were up there one Thanksgiving, and he said, he looked in the paper. I brought it up again, and so he looked in the paper.
Who did?
Peter.
Bob?
Bob. And he saw this ad for these cottages. There was more than one. So they called up answered the ad, or called up the number, and they couldn't go up because there was too much snow. So they went up, Wally and Bob and Peter and Nancy all went up, and I stayed home with the children. And they found one bigger cottage and 3 smaller ones and a big garage, which they were offering for $59,000.
It's worth its weight in gold, no?
And there was another party came too, who the man was showing, the banker was showing them around. They paid no attention to our party, Nancy, I mean Bob and Wally and Peter, paid no attention because they had a great big car. And so, but even so, they were talking with him, so they said, he said, well, he looked it over and didn't say too much. And they were talking about the price, and they said, will you think it over? And he said, you call me if you're interested. And Bob said, no, you call me. Because these others weren't interested. They didn't want that much property. So they said, they offered him certainly, well, he couldn't lower the price. 59,000 was what they were asking. So they couldn't lower the price, but then he came down and he did, because they were thinking of even selling each cottage separate because they couldn't get any buyer. So they settled on 42,000.
Wow, so you bought the whole shebang. And this is on which lake?
Wentworth.
Lake Wentworth.
In the town of Wolfboro.
Up in Wolfboro.
It's connected to Winnipesaukee.
The lakes connect?
Yeah, in fact, I guess Wolfboro helps feed Winnipesaukee. There's a bridge right through the center of the town where it's a connection, and the big boat comes right to the edge of the lake there and takes passengers.
Now, when did you all when did this happen? When did you start having the connection to Wolfboro?
1969. We bought it in 70.
So this is 21 years.
21 years. We've been repairing every year. You have to repair things, and it's been a godsend. Though all the grandchildren had summer work there and good work too. Like Beth was in the University of Massachusetts, and she had to have credits where she didn't get tips, like cleaning the motel. One place up there had a big motel and a restaurant connected with it too, and she got her credits working in the motel one summer. And Peter was working in a bakery up there, and David worked in a stationery store, and they sold newspapers and all sorts of souvenirs and things. And he also worked in the movie theater. And Andrew and Jimmy both worked in the same outfit where Beth had worked, the Bailey's they call it, which is a very busy place up there. Working in selling ice cream, and they have a restaurant too. So they all got work and had a good time at the same time.
Yeah, great. A real unifying sort of thing, I guess.
Because they'd work not a full day. They'd work certain hours, and they'd go in at the restaurant. They'd have certain shifts. They'd go in. But of course, Beth would go in when she was done for the day. Then she was. Those are her hours when she could play. So it worked out very well.
And these are not winterized, so you don't go up there in the depths of winter.
Peter does. They have a.
Your grandson or your son?
My grandson. They don't have. We don't have water. You see, I don't know if we could have a well. They'd like to. That's the drawback. But they made them quite comfortable in the winter. We have skylights put in the bigger cottage now, and electric heat in the bathroom, so that's nice and warm. And the stoves heat up very well. So Peter loves to go up there in the snowmobile, and they go skating up there, and they don't go ice fishing, but they do ice fishing.
You and my mother, it seems to me that you and my mother were, let me put it this way, my mother felt closer to you than to any of her other siblings. I remember her going to see you, and you coming over to call on her a lot, especially when my father had that long illness that eventually caused his death indirectly. And you'd come over, and Wally would come, and he would usually sit out. He wouldn't converse as much. He'd read the paper or something. But you and Mother talked a lot about all sorts of things,
She was.
Washington things and whatever. Do you have any special memories of Sigrid, my mother, that come to mind as we just sit here and...
Well, we always went to Washington, reminisced on the way. And
you mean you take trips up there from...
Yes, every fall and sometimes in the spring too.
Mm-hmm.
We perhaps could have done it more often, but she loved to get together. They weren't at my age, but known the families where we'd visit. But I always look forward to being with her. She's so kind, and I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with her. But sometimes I think she really didn't. She said she was never lonely.
I think that's right. Mother didn't have a lot of friends, but she didn't need a lot.
She didn't want any. I don't think she wanted to be too close to many friends.
I think that's right.
But she saw them, she'd be very cordial with them and friendly, but I don't think she craved that. Some people...
No, yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly right.
But I have only very good memories of her. She was so kind to everybody, even like Mary Hicks, remember her, the help she
the
used
black
to have.
lady used to clean the house.
She was just as kind to them as she would be to anyone.
Yeah.
Yes. And she would guide us, in things and correct us if there were things that we were doing that we...
What kind of corrections?
Well, like she'd have us over purposely for meals sometime when she'd have other people in, just so we'd get the feeling of, well, you live alone, you don't have the same table manners necessarily to do if you have company. Not that we were Slavish or anything like that, but I mean, it's a proper thing to do. We should be invited out somewhere. Yes,
you mean place settings and which fork to use and things like that?
Tutoring, sort of.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yes, she was. She was very thoughtful about doing things correctly and being kind.
I remember she never really kept up with her Swedish, and you've gone on, you've learned to read and write it and speak it. And her mother just spoke it and then understood it. But she was always telling my father and my brother and me about asking us to correct her use of words or her enunciation and things like that. And she was a little bit obsessed about mastering the English language.
In fact, because I was a teacher, I guess she thought I would know everything. They sometimes think that. Well, I taught first grade or first, second, or third. But even so, you'd like to do it quickly. But I know she would say, she said, is that the word? Sometimes put me on the spot. She'd send me on the spot. She'd send me to the dictionary to see if it was. Yes. Well, she had only good reports. Her friends all loved her. And the one she grew up with, and everybody in Washington loved her. So it wasn't. So it went.
You told me, didn't you, one time not long ago, that she was first in her class in the Hartford Hospital Nursing School
3 years.
3 years in a row?
The only time it had happened, and then it was some other. I think she got second prize the last year and something else too. Mm-hmm. She never told you that.
I had to hear it from you. If she told me, I didn't remember. I don't think she did.
Yeah, she would lead and roomed with Edith Davis.
I've heard of Edie Davis.
Yeah. Yes, she was. She'd studied hard. I remember her sitting, in Washington too, reading.
Taking her books home.
Yes, and studying, without interruptions. Of course, Leroy was a reader too.
Yeah, Mother said
it came harder to her, I think, than to him.
Well, so she was. What she liked, she was a good student, obviously.
Yes, but she had to work hard.
But she had to work hard for it to get it?
Yeah. But it had to be correct. But she was got into the social life in Washington, in the church, and with the young people. They had quite a few then. I remember when she was 16, Mother they had lemon sherbet she made, you know, with the ice cream freezer. And she had, they'd strung things out in the front yard there, all kinds of Japanese lanterns.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps to all the young people in the church. I don't remember. All I remember is a lot of people.
But you know, Mother wasn't that social when she was in West Hartford.
No,
she was, in fact, one of our neighbors, there was some sort of little misunderstanding between my mother and father and Fred and Mildred McCabe, who were next door.
Yeah.
And I remember Mother and my mother and father talking about it afterwards. You know, they were friends, but never intimates. They were just neighbors, good neighbors, actually. And Mr. McCabe said to my mother, you know, he called her Johnny, as many people did when she left Washington. She said, "You're not very gregarious." And she said, and my father agreed, that's right. She doesn't seek out a lot of people to be friends with. She'll be kind to them when she meets them, but she really didn't need to make an effort to have a lot of folks around all the time.
But she made a point to, like that woman, I think it was a doctor's widow who went blind, who was in the hospital where your father was.
Yeah.
She used to make it a point to visit people, and she did nice things for them.
Yeah.
She remembered them with cards or calling them. Sometimes called on the phone. I know it's not too often, but if she didn't see Mrs. Cheney out, isn't that the one?
She was. They moved into the house after the McCabe's left, next door.
And the family on the corner, where it's been developed now.
Helen Foote.
If she didn't hear from her, I know she would call and see if she was all right.
Yeah.
So she was always ready to be helpful, but I don't know if she refused people or maybe she made it plain that she just didn't care to belong to a bridge club or a reading club or anything like that.
I think that's it. She really didn't need a group that would meet periodically, once a month or something like that, and she really didn't like to give parties.
No. I remember, I don't think you were there, but one Easter, I don't know how it got started, but we all went over there, our whole family, Ruth and Leroy and all Eleanor and her family and our family. And Mother and Dad, we were all over there for dinner one Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lot of work.
Yeah. And she was such a perfectionist.
Yes.
She'd want to do it all, you know.
Right.
I remember and of course she had some wonderful ladies who helped her growing, Mary Rice, Mary Hicks, who you talked about, the black lady from Georgia, Mary Rice, a Lithuanian, daughter of Lithuanian immigrants from
Swedish girl.
And Nellie McAuliffe came after Mary. And when Mother and Jerry went to Arizona that winter, Nellie McAuliffe and my father and I were there all alone. They became real friends to my mother.
Yes, she treated them on her level. You know, she didn't make anyone feel beneath her.
But you know, they knew who the boss was.
Yes, yes, they did. They wouldn't take
But she wasn't, you know, overbearing. But she was in charge, and after World War II, when there weren't that many people around to be like housekeeping, cleaning up ladies, and so a mother would have one after another, and they'd come in and spend a day cleaning the house, and it wasn't excessively clean the way she wanted it. And after these ladies would leave, after these women would go home, she'd do it all over again. And in her 70s.
Right. Yeah. And she used to say, "I love to work." She really did.
Yeah.
As long as she was able, she didn't leave anything undone. Well, I don't take after her that way. I don't make my house my slave. But I like to have things in order, but I don't, as I said, I'm getting careless, I guess, in my
well,
years.
even in your youth when you had a lot more energy, and you're remarkable. How old are you now?
86.
86. I was going to guess that.
87 in June.
I remember when we went to Boston in 1985, on New Year's Day, you had just had your hip replaced.
Right.
Total hip?
It was yeah, the last day in 84.
Yeah.
I was there. You were there.
We were there
Winter,
from January
85,
until
yeah. Yes.
July.
Yeah, I was in the hospital about 10 days. Yes.
But even when I remember you used to bake a lot of things when you were younger. And I remember you baked apple pies. Saturday was the baking day, I think. And I remember you made these curls. You'd have leftover pie crusts and put cinnamon on them, roll them up. And I remember you popped open the oven and cooled off a little bit and you gave me one. And I thought, this is the greatest invention I've ever heard of.
Just the leftovers.
And, you know, I was a little boy then because I used to go over to see Grandpa Johnson and eat pancakes with him. We'd match them. I'd eat about 8 and he would eat either 5 or 8. I'm not sure if I'm exaggerating.
Well, you know what he always said? I always go from the table a little hungry.
Yeah.
But he also said, that's the one pleasure I have left. Because he was pretty crippled with arthritis and lame, you know. Well,
Ben's just come back. I noticed that red light's blinking over there on us.
It means that you have 2 minutes left.
Are we running down on the battery there or here? Is it a warning for the tape recorder?
I think you're running down on. I think you're running down on tape.
Okay.
So we should probably wind down.
We'll have to do another time and talk, or another tape anyway, and talk about all you know about Sweden, your Swedish connections. Shall we stop now, Ben? Okay.
Sounds good to me.